Welcome to Venator Chronicles Podcast. I'm Ethan Taylor.
And I'm Dustin Jelly.
Our hope is to inspire new and old hunters alike.
We hope you can join us on this journey of lessons that we have, are, and will learn through the world of hunting.
3, 2, 1, we are live.
Back at it.
Back at it again. Episode 5.
Yeah.
Finally.
Yeah, we're 5 deep. So, how you doing?
Pretty good. I got out again. I know I went over it last week when we were talking about turkeys and all the information I didn't have. I actually went out and did some scouting this week, and I got out by myself, which had some benefits. So it was pretty good. And I also did get a turkey call. Actually, you hooked me up with my first diaphragm call. Was that the technical name?
It's a mouth call.
I call it a mouth call.
Yeah.
And if you haven't seen it already on our Instagram.
Yeah, please go to our Instagram page and watch the video of Ethan trying to learn the mouth call.
Yeah.
You won't regret it.
You won't. It's pretty hilarious. I've been assured by a bunch of people, though. They're like, everybody's been there.
Yeah, I did it myself.
So if anybody's listening that has a mouth call, you already know what we're talking about. So, and if you haven't, you need to go look at it. Because when it happened and I was recording it right after, I was like laughing hysterically. I was like, that's unbelievable. I can't believe that just happened. Amazing.
So do you have an idea of where you're going turkey hunting now?
Yes. Yeah. And I talked to your homie from, now I got to make sure I said Havy Game Calls.
Javi.
I always say Havy.
Yeah, it's Javi.
Okay. Javi Game Calls.
Short for Havenstein.
Havenstein.
Yeah,
Steve
Havenstein.
Oh, I'm sorry. I went
Steven. You got to pronounce it a little French accent. No, I don't think he's French.
Yeah. So I had an opportunity to use Onyx and send him a map that I had marked up where I had seen turkeys just traveling naturally last fall, like a lot. And I was like, hey, basically, is this, I know you and I are probably going to plan on running and gunning a little bit in those hills by the river bottom. But I did send him a map and I was like, I'm going to just take some dead foliage and just kind of build some blinds where I think it'd be kind of like a high probability area for them to be crossing or walking in front of me, because that's what it was last year.
Nice.
So, and then I did find a couple new spots. I did see one gobbler like 400 yards away feeding on this open area, and then I jumped another one that was only like 15 yards ahead of me off one of the fingers of these hills. Nice. So I'm pretty excited. I also accidentally tracked a bear for a little bit. Ooh, so that was fun.
That's exciting. Tell me about that.
Well, the snow had it finally is warming up. The snow was starting to melt, and I got out there and I was following this beaten trail, and it started as a deer trail, and somehow I crossed paths, and I'm following this, and I'm going, and like, because it's melted, you can't tell the tracks. You can just see the indents. And I was like, oh, sweet, a heavily used trail. And I'm following it, and I get to some scat, and I'm like, yeah, that's a bear. That's a black bear. Never mind.
So I hope you're not confusing a bear tracks with deer tracks.
No, I'm not. It was
explain a few things.
It was melted, and I was like, oh, quite a few deer have been walking here, but
gotcha.
it was actually just a bear. So
nice.
Yeah, it was pretty sweet. So I'm pretty excited for that. I did find a couple areas where there's some buck rubs, and just areas I haven't been yet. And so I spent a good amount of time out there, just kind of getting the lay of the land where we're going to be turkey hunting. So what about you? I know you've picked up we can make jokes about this, but I'll just let you tell us about it.
So, well, I haven't been out scouting much. I'm hoping to get out soon. Just a lack of time because I might have been investing my time elsewhere. So, no joke, 3 weeks ago, I was talking with my wife, and I started talking about recurve hunting, and told her that's something I'd love to do in the future. I had a recurve years ago, didn't know how to shoot it, so I sold them. But I always kind of had in the back of my mind going into archery hunting that at some point I'd like to try recurve, and no joke, I told her 3 weeks ago, I was like, I'd like to do this, but I'm going to wait a few years, because I know once I pick one up, I'm going to want to do it, and I just need to dedicate this time to the compound world. And
so this was, if I'm understanding you correctly, 3 weeks ago.
3 weeks ago.
You said this.
I said this.
So does that mean you'd mentioned in the last podcast that you were not duck hunting because you'll get way too into it way too fast?
Exactly.
So does that mean we're going to be duck hunting and goose hunting this fall?
Nope.
Allegedly.
Yeah, allegedly. No,
we'll see.
Yeah, no, I'm not going because I know. So a couple weeks ago, I was looking at selling or trading one of my releases, which when I have a future episode on Dusty's 39 releases and that journey.
And Ethan's like 2.5.
Yeah. And this guy offered me a recurve for a release, and it was a nice looking recurve, and so I just took it up because I thought, hey, at least I'll have one. And well, I got it, and last week, not even a week, and I have yet to put it down. Like,
dude,
this
rabbit
thing,
hole.
Yeah, this
You're
thing
gone.
sucked me in. Like,
You're gone.
Like, so I went from telling my wife 3 weeks ago, yes, I'm not doing this, to I got a recurve, and now I'm looking at getting. As long as I can get proficient enough at 20 and under, I'm totally taking it turkey hunting next month.
I seriously can't believe that.
I
can and I can't.
It's a dark, deep, beautiful hole that I fell into. So, yeah.
You know what you remember when I
pretty
posted on your page after that?
Yeah.
I was like, oh, okay, well, as long as we're just like going more primitive.
Forget the recurve. Here's a little...
Addle.
Yeah, addle.
Yeah, addle. And then after that, once you've become...
Just a straight rocks.
And then just rocks.
Yeah, just rocks.
And pretty soon it'll be bare hands.
Yeah.
That's what we're working towards.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
I mean, apparently the game's getting upped every time.
I fell in deep. This thing's beautiful. I actually watched some videos, learned how to, somewhat, shoot it, where I can actually hit a pie plate at 10 yards now, which is far better than I did last time I had a recurve, but I'm just falling in love with it. Like, I mean, it's amazing picking up this bow. Like, it's just, it just feels good. So, yeah, it's a dark, deep hole that I'm glad I fell down, even though my wife rolls her eyes and you've been rolling your eyes. So, but I can't wait. It's going to be exciting.
That's pretty awesome. You'll probably end up sucking me in, at least trying it out and seeing how that feels. I'm sure. I mean,
you can join the hat backwards crowd.
The problem is though, is like you can do this. I mean, we could legitimately just keep going down. I mean, you even said,
but with the recurve, there was a legitimate like desire that's been there for years. So it's only a fulfillment of that, not starting something new. Like, actually, right now, I don't really have a whole lot of desire to go duck hunting. I'm sure it'll be fun, and I'm sure once I do, I'll get sucked in. But I don't have that desire not right now.
But this is the thing that threw me a little bit, is that
kind of like shed hunting.
Easy.
Wah, wah, wah.
Easy. We're gonna have someone on here today that might have some words about that.
I know.
No, but what I was it caught me a little off guard is you actually sent me a message and you're like, you went from holding this the recurve. Is that made of, what is it made of? Actually, that'd be a good question.
Wood and fiberglass.
Okay, so you went from your bow. What do you have again? You switch every week. It's hard to keep up.
My compound.
Yeah.
Matthews Wake.
Okay, so you went from that, and then you grabbed the recurve, and then you grabbed the wake again. And what did you say you felt like?
Yeah, that was crazy. So once after shooting the recurve for like a day, I wanted to go grab my wake and start shooting that for a little bit. And I could not believe the experience of how different those two bows felt. Like, I grabbed the recurve, and I mean, it's light, but it felt alive. Like, there's just something special about it. And then once I grabbed the compound, it was just like, holy cow! Like, this thing, it almost feels lifeless. Like, there's like this powerful but lifeless piece of machinery in my hand. I mean, I actually couldn't believe the experience between how the two bows felt and how different.
See, and then okay, so
Curve sucking me in, Ethan.
I know it's a little scary to watch, to be honest, from a distance.
It's like I took the red pill.
Yeah. And here's the other thing that caught me off guard a little bit. I guess one with that, I mean, I imagine that's kind of why I made the joke about the addle and the rocks. It's like, oh, if all these are going to make us more connected, then let's just keep going more primitive. But here's the other thing that did catch me off guard, and I kind of wanted to talk about it a little bit.
Oh boy,
because I did have like a mind, and not even a bone to pick is probably. I just want to have a conversation about it. When you said, "Oh, when you're spot and stocking with this, opposed to a compound bow, you're way more connected and tuned in."
Oh, let me provide some context.
Please do.
I didn't say that. I was quoting Donnie Vincent and how he was talking about his experience of being immersed in the situation. So I'm totally going off theory here.
Okay.
I have no experience. I claim no expertise. Actually, I claim no expertise in anything, really.
Yeah.
But I found it interesting listening to a podcast he was on with some Tom Klum and a couple other guys, and they were talking about the immersion in a hunting scenario with the various weapons, and how with a rifle it's vastly different than a compound. How much more immersed into that like particular hunting scenario you are with the compound, and how that's even magnified with the recurve, and that because you have to get so much closer, you tend to have to wait longer to where there's this immersion, this deeper immersion because of the nature of how close you have to get. And I thought it was interesting because I'd heard people talk about the experience. And being millennial, we're all about experiences. So
absolutely.
But I hadn't heard anybody articulate it that way. So I thought it was really interesting. I found that to be a really good articulation of the difference.
Yeah, and
theoretically,
and this is what if you remember what I typed back to you, it was interesting thought, because it was an interesting thought. But the thing that I was struggling with a little bit was like, okay, well, if I only trust myself proficiently to 20 to 30 yards. I mean, like, how? I mean, so you're not John Dudley or any other person who's going to be shooting, 50, 60, 70 yards. If you're me, which is like probably 40 yards max, and that's if I'm feeling like tuned in and all that, because I don't have the experience right now. It'd be hard for me to believe, like hard pressed for me to go, oh, this experience is going to be so much different, even though I'm at the same yardage or very close to the same yardage. I get the idea if you're going from like, oh, I can shoot from 90 yards away and smoke an animal to, oh, now I got to be within 20 to 30. And then all of a sudden I feel like that would be a big difference. But when the proficiency is where mine is at right now or not at, depending on your outlook, it's hard for me to believe that it would be that big of a difference, because I'm like, if you're getting that close to the animal, it doesn't really matter what's in your hand. It's in my mind. Yeah. It's like, that's a huge experience that I don't think would be super diluted because you have a compound versus a recurve. But I will say this, I'm open to being wrong because I have been wrong before.
I'll tell you what, I'll let you know once I experience it.
Hopefully I'm
actually hoping to get my first turkey this season with the recurve, as long as I can get proficient enough.
That'd be intense. That'd be so cool.
Hopeful.
So I know I'm giving you a hard time, but I also am really excited for you, and I'm going to have to try that out, and it's going to be exciting.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so speaking of exciting, so we've been talking about this even before the podcast started, and he's been a part of our conversations even before the podcast was even what is brainchild?
Yeah,
what
brainchild,
for it?
Yeah.
We're
brain
gonna
fart. This might be more of a brain fart than a brainchild.
He's got some words for you as soon as he gets out of here with that attitude.
No, the podcast, not him. The podcast.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Before the podcast was a brain fart.
All right. Well, okay.
Just clarifying.
I'm glad he cleared that up. Oh, man. So today we do have a very special guest. It is number 6 of 10 children, Seth Taylor, who's going to be on today.
I thought we were interviewing Jesse.
Huh. No. Jesse doesn't even hunt. Oh, no. He listens to this, though, so he's going to be upset that we're going to call him
Shout out to Jesse.
Yeah, Jesse. You can... I don't know what he can share with us. Something. And moving on.
I'm actually really excited. So,
yeah. Well, I guess part of the reason we wanted Seth on is one, because he's going to deal with all of our technical issues, and we wouldn't have to feel bad. Okay.
Yes.
And we did have a fair share of technical issues, did we not?
Yes.
And the other part of it is that Seth, as everybody knows, has introduced me to bow hunting and using a bow. He gave me a bow for free because he upgraded his and arrows. And
what a brother!
Totally hooked me up.
Brother.
There's no way I would be bow hunting without it.
So
and then hold on, okay. I think the biggest thing for both, where you and I started where you've made a connection with Seth via you and I
vicariously.
Vicariously. They're perfect. Good word. Is the hunting tactics that we're using, and Seth has a resume that's hanging on his wall that does speak for itself.
Very beautiful,
and he's got some really cool ideas, perspectives that we're really excited to talk about and kind of explore. So we are going to dig into basically whitetails for the most part from here on out. So without further ado, Seth Taylor. Welcome,
How's it
Seth.
going, boys?
Good. How are you doing?
I am doing fantastic. Happy to be talking whitetails.
Finally.
It's been a while.
Now that we finally got all of our technical difficulties out of the way.
Yes.
Hopefully. Theoretically.
It's been 2 hours.
Yeah.
Nope. Sorry. That's
an hour and a half.
40 minutes.
Yeah. Maybe.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's not too bad. I mean,
that's a sleek 2 hours there.
That is just a little below average on our technical difficulties.
Yes.
It's all right. Pays good. Pays good.
Yeah, almost. Do you just want to go through and just kind of fill us in on your background and where you're at and how you got there?
Yeah.
Where I'm at, how I got here.
Yeah.
I guess 32 years old, got wife, 2 kids. They my wife likes to do a bit of hunting. 2 kids, they like to check the trail cameras, and but where it all started, I guess, is well, obviously I lived back in Wisconsin with you, and I think I started probably around 12, and hunted back in Wisconsin for a while. Live in North Dakota now. Most of hunting back in Wisconsin, obviously, it was big woods and a lot of trial and error, mostly error. Sit the same stands over and over again, and sit bait piles a lot. That's a whole nother story. I don't know if that's a whole nother podcast, but there's a correct way to do that, and there's an incorrect way to do that. And I did the incorrect way of hunting a bait pile for several years. So it took me a while to shoot a deer. But over the years, I guess, about 20 years now, I think I've started to work the kinks out in the last maybe 5 years. I've been a little bit better, got more consistent, shooting decent bucks. And I don't know, it's just, like you guys know, it's a learning process. And for me, it's just been kind of figuring out what works, what doesn't work, like any other hunter, and kind of eliminating the things that don't work and kind of finding out what does, and just trying to do that a bit more often,
Yeah, that's awesome. I do have a question for you. And I actually genuinely don't know this, and I'm your brother, so this is really good. So when did you actually start bow hunting?
I would say the same years I started gun hunting.
Oh, really?
I know.
It was that early on?
Yeah.
What poundage were you pulling back at 12?
Probably 35 pounds, I think, was the legal limit.
Nice.
At least that's what I'm going to say.
Heyo!
Anyway.
I mean, you're from Superior, so,
Okay. Wow, Dusty.
Yeah, see? Low blows left and right from Dusty.
Ethan loves it when I get those in
Mr.
there.
Across the bridge.
He's got that. His nose is up really high every time he's in here.
Yeah.
I live up on the hill.
So I guess I do have a question as far as...
Sure.
I mean, you brought it up a little bit, and it was kind of a big topic for us on our last podcast, was this idea of shed hunting.
Oh, man.
What?
Sure.
Yeah, we're going back into it, Dustin.
We're going there.
Yeah, 2v1. All right. No, but I would be really interested on your thoughts on it. I mean, do you see it as controversial at all? Do you see it as like, I'm out here just shed hunting? Do you combine it with something else? Like, how do you view shed hunting, and like, what does that look like in your mind when you think of shed hunting?
That's a great question. It's a really good question. So shed hunting for me, well, one of the more important things, shed hunting for me, my whole family and I do it. So when it comes to hunting in general, for me, it's been basically including them in whatever I can do. So on the hunting end of things, I like to use it as scouting. I don't spend a ton of time, even in the off season, in the places I hunt, just for the sake of a lot of the area in North Dakota. It's either a coulee with some woods in it, or it's open grassland. So when you're talking about shed hunting, you're talking about these valleys with trees and things like that, and sometimes they're not that big.
Is that what a coulee? I gotta interrupt you. Is that, I actually was googling this the other day, and the one thing we talk about is like having newer people on here. Mm-hmm. Is that what a coulee is? Just a valley? What, I mean, why is it called?
I believe so. I'm
a
pretty new North Dakotan, but yeah.
Okay.
But anyways, yeah. So I guess for me, it'll be just a good time out with the family, finding some sheds, and then it'll be I'll be doing some scouting in there. Like I said, I don't really like to spend too much time, even in the off season, or if there is such a thing, in the late season, I guess, or the early season of the next year.
Just spoken like a true whitetail hunter.
Yes.
I don't particularly like to be in where I know exactly where a buck is living. So we'll go in and we'll go looking for sheds in the general area. Yeah. Me and my brother-in-law went out to a spot where I wasn't going to touch it basically at all, except for once to shed hunt, because I know basically where these deer are living and bedding and wintering. So I wanted to go in there one time, one sweep through, and leave it alone, because It's actually private land that I got permission to hunt. So I don't shed hunt a lot, I guess, is the main thing. I don't shed hunt a lot in areas that I hunt. I'll use it once or twice, maybe, and I'll go in and check, for sheds and then maybe some scrapes and rubs. But other than that, I like to do a lot of shed hunting in areas where I know bucks are, but they're not target bucks.
Mm-hmm.
So you might find anything there. But, out here it's a little easier to, I think, even find sheds because a lot of things are narrowed down because there's so much open grassland out here.
That makes sense.
I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I think
what
it
was
does.
the question now?
Basically, like what your thoughts were on shed hunting. So I think that
Ethically?
Yeah, maybe even ethically. If do you have any thoughts on that at all, or does it not bother you a
if
bit?
a deer's going to shed his horns, that you should go out and you should find them because they're a beautiful thing.
Yeah, all right.
That is exactly.
We're gonna get real deep. Why do you like sheds?
Oh gosh, because they're on the top of a whitetail and then they're on the ground and I can pick them up without killing them and I can get as many of them as I can find.
Straight to the point. I like it. That's awesome.
Yeah. I hunt for
what?
Yeah. Anyways.
Yeah.
For inches.
Anything you
people
can
say. People say you can't eat the horns, but I wonder how many people have really tried. Anyway, yeah, it's a whitetail joke. No big deal.
Well done. So I guess big part of why we wanted you on here is, like we kind of mentioned before you were on with us.
Sure.
You've kind of impacted the way that I hunt, and then in turn, it's kind of rubbed off on Dusty as well.
Yep.
And this was Dusty's first successful season, and it was on a buck. And when I say successful, I'm talking about doe or buck. And so this year he was able to do that, kind of using the tactics that I had learned or that you had kind of encouraged me in. What I'd be interested in is if you can, I don't know if there's a time where you can put your finger on it, like, oh yeah, around this time I started hunting differently. I would like to get a picture, if you could try to paint one for us, of what it looked like before that time. And then like when you felt like, oh, maybe I'm starting to figure this out or doing this right, and started hunting a different way. So like how do those two contrast each other?
Kind of like what was the old tactics that you were using compared to the new ones that you've learned or are learning?
I guess my answer to that, I moved to North Dakota. There's a lot less trees, so a lot less places for them to hide. Mm-hmm. No, but seriously,
I was hoping that was a joke.
So if you could just eliminate most of the trees in Wisconsin, you're probably going to see more deer.
That's a good point.
That is true.
Yeah.
No, but
it's hard to find
here is the thing. Here's the thing. So my last, what is it? I think my last 4 years, each year that I've been out here, I've been able to tag out on a decent buck. And
so humble. I love decent buck. We'll be posting a picture of Seth's wall on our Instagram. I'm gonna, whether I have to beg, whatever I need to do to get that picture.
Not all that wall is mine though. That's just what I tell my brother.
Most
of it.
But here's
all of it.
Yeah, but
that's a disclaimer, just in case my wife calls you up and says, "Hey,
I got this one
on Instagram that said this is Seth Taylor's buck."
Okay, well, we will tag both of you, but would it be fair to say before we post it that both you and your wife are using similar tactics?
We're using the same tactics.
Okay, so it's somewhat tried and true in that way. So that's what we'll post them with. Yeah. No.
We are not using the exact same tactics. There's 4 different tactics you can hunt a whitetail with. She's using 1 of 4, and I use 4 of 4.
So
I didn't know we had 4. All right.
So shut up, Ethan.
Yeah,
I want to hear
listen.
Seth.
All right, go.
Oh, you want to hear the tactics?
Yeah, kind of like what kind of like what were you using before?
Okay.
For many years.
I'll go back to where I was.
Perfect,
okay,
yeah.
So when I moved out here, I started having more success, but then I started realizing in those successes what was happening differently. Me and Ethan were talking before, kind of about like, what's the most important aspect of whitetail hunting. And of course, I don't think there's one, because on any given day, the most important aspect could be different. For example, I walked my wife to her tree stand one morning, had scent on my boots, doe urine, doe estrus, and I go and drop her off in her stand, walking right in behind me, 20 yards, giant buck right on my tail. So in that instance, if she would have had just the doe pee on her boot and she would have got up in her tree and that buck would have come a little later, that could have been the thing that day that was the most important, was putting scent on your boot. And then it could be surveillance, your entry, your length of sit, sound, like when you're getting in your tree, out of your tree, clanking your stand, all that stuff. But I guess the thing that I would say changed the most is basically for me, surveillance. If I would have known years ago how important it was to have information is by far, obviously by far the most important thing you can get. You guys and myself, we don't hunt professionally. We don't have all the time in the world to be out there, whether it's boots on the ground or whatever. But if I would have invested money early on into trail cameras, I would have done considerably better, because the biggest thing is knowing where they are and where they're not. Right?
That actually brings up a really good point. And I think, Dusty, I probably mentioned this to you, during our hunting season, basically, is that Seth was like, because I was literally, this is going to be great. Everyone's going to love this, because I'm somewhat of a name brand person. I like certain name brands and I want to get their stuff. And Seth kind of really opened my eyes to this, and I was sitting here and I'm agonizing. I got this budget, right? And I'm like, oh, do I buy a Sitka upper and lower camo? And then that way I'll look really cool. And I called Seth one day because he ended up getting a set of it, right? But he's been at it much longer than me. And I'm talking to him on the phone and I'm like, dude, I don't know if I should go with this and then get like a camera or two. He's like, exactly what you just said. The information is so invaluable. And he was saying you literally can't be out hunting 24/7, but your cameras are out there 24/7, and you could sit out for an entire week and not see a single buck that you want to shoot, and you wouldn't know that outside of just having your camera there.
Oh wait, I thought the whole point of hunting was to look cool.
Yeah, see,
Shoot.
that's
what I've been doing wrong.
That's what I had backward.
Man.
That's where I was starting from. But what was really cool is what he was saying was that, like, the percentage that camouflage would help you compared to the percentage that a camera would help you. And
well,
go ahead.
I think one thing also that I've learned out here and that plays into that is that deer are absolutely creatures of habit. If you, like I did when I was younger, you're sitting in your stand and it can be the same stand or it could be the same area. And it's faithful. Like you're not seeing deer. You're not seeing deer. And you expect unless it's rut, but you expect that just out of coincidence that one day you're going to go there and you're going to see a deer. And you've had a trail cam out there. You haven't had any big bucks on it. You haven't had anything worth shooting. Yet you're going out to the same area. Now, trail cameras get a bad rap because they say you can only see this much. So you don't know whether it's good or bad. And that's absolutely correct. Okay. But at the same time, deer, since they are such creatures of habit, if you can find a buck in that area where your trail camera is, 10-1, like, that's a spot I'm going to hit if it's a buck we're shooting, right? So, and on the flip side of that, especially running them late season, you might be putting them up in areas that you haven't hunted, you don't have intention to hunt, but you're going to see what's there. You might see the buck of a lifetime. And I found that this year, just putting out random trail cameras in different spots. So as much as they don't show you a full picture, if you can get a picture of a shooter buck on that trail camera, at least that buck, is in that zone. And from the amount of hunting I've screwed up this year and bucks that I've busted, I know for a fact that I busted the same buck 3 times in the same bed. That was on my trail camera. So one of the things that's changed is I have a serious understanding of these deer They are they're where you can find them, and then most of the time they stay there. I guess is what I'm getting at. So it's not as random as we think it is. It's really not, or used to think it is.
So when you're putting out these trail cams, how long are you putting them out? How many do you put in an area? Do you put more than one in an area, or what does that kind of look like for you?
Okay, so if I find, now this is one thing that I've been working on. I've been working on trying to basically pattern a deer like all these professionals do. Okay. If I find a buck I really want to shoot, and I found just one this upcoming year, I'm gonna probably stick. Well, I stuck 5 trail cameras down in there just to see which direction he's coming from. And that's another thing that I don't think Ethan finished his thought on is he was asking me a couple months ago or a few months ago, whenever the beginning of the season was, he was asking what kind of camo to buy. And I told him, buy trail cameras instead, because you need to know where the deer are. It doesn't matter what kind of bow you have. It doesn't matter how well you shoot. It doesn't matter what you're wearing. If you're not in a spot where a deer is, then
you're looking pretty.
You look like Dusty the first 2 years.
You look really good in a tree.
That's I spent a lot of time doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the game changers is I've never been able to afford a bunch of trail cameras, but I've been extremely blessed last few years to be able to afford them. So I have some cheaper trail cameras, but they have video mode, and that's another thing I would recommend you use. Most of the time, deer are together, so if you can have a camera on video mode and you can get a 30-second snip, do that. Because a lot of time, especially this time of year, and even a month or two ago, maybe a month ago, depending on the state, those bucks are going to be bachelored up, and I can't tell you how many pictures I would have just got of the first buck if I hadn't had it on video.
Dude, that's a really interesting tidbit, actually.
I've always gone with pictures.
Yeah. Wow.
No.
Huh.
Well, and I use $50 cameras because you can buy a lot of those.
Yep.
So put it on video mode because you would be surprised how many deer can move through that shot in 30 seconds. And most of the time, deer are with other deer. So
that makes sense.
Expand your horizons.
Nice.
Yeah.
So one other thing that in that conversation, I was sitting outside. I remember I was sitting outside at work, and it was right after work, and I'm like obsessing over this camouflage like for the day. I'm like, oh man, what am I going to use my budget for?
So cute.
It was adorable. And I remember when we were talking, and this is where we're going to get into something that I know some people, and even people that we admire and we follow, don't give a hoot about. But one thing, Seth, that you brought up that I thought was really interesting was percentages, which did apply to the camera, and then also like scent control, whether it's worthwhile or not. What are your thoughts on that? Because and then do you remember kind of the conversation about percentages and like
I remember
what affects the hunt?
I live by it.
Yeah, so just share your thoughts on that kind of stuff, because I know that's one thing that's kind of hotly debated.
Here is the deal: these deer are 100% of the time trying to survive. 100% of the time. We're going out there as a bunch of avid hunters or hobbyists, whatever we're doing out there. And we're trying to take whatever percentages. I'll explain it this way. So if you want to go after a buck, there's probably, depending on the area you're at, there's maybe a 2% chance you're going to kill a buck that day. So what you can do.
A target buck, or what do you mean?
A target buck,
okay.
Any buck,
okay.
Any deer.
Okay.
So these deer are out there 100% of the time on 100% alert, trying to survive. So what I've learned over the years is, like we were talking about before, if someone asks me what's the most important aspect to hunting, or what is the one thing you think is the most important, first off, I would say surveillance, but I think that's part of the stacking the odds. So when you first go out to shoot a deer, in my mind, there's a very finite chance, say like a 2% chance, right? So you got 98% that's off in the wind or whatever. Now, as far as this is my thought process on it, So as far as I know, if I can get descented, like as best I can, I feel like maybe that'll add 1%. I think that maybe it's rut. So maybe I'm going to throw a little estrus on my boot or whatever. So maybe I get another percent. I've been putting in a ton of time checking cameras, stuff like that. So I get a little bit more. Entry, Now, going into this spot, I got a short little entry in there, but the wind ain't right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to take the long way, but I feel like, that's going to up my percentage a little bit. There's nothing that says at a certain percent you're going to shoot a deer, but at some point you need to start stacking odds in your favor a little bit more. And I think that's the difference between kind of like seasoned hunters and people like there's people who shoot 200-inch deer, and it's a once in a lifetime deer that goes on their wall, and they got one deer on their wall because by some chance, some fluke, they hit their 2%, they shot that buck, but then every other year they're not shooting big bucks. At some point, you have to stack the odds as much in your favor as you can by eliminating the things that are incorrect and by being consistent in the things that are correct. If you can add a little bit more length of time to your sit, do that. That's going to increase your odds. I redneck my stands. When I'm walking in and out of places, I got duct tape that's attached to foam, that's attached to zip ties, that's attached to whatever else. So when I'm walking in, my stand's not clanking. I'm walking in quiet. I'm getting out quiet. So kind of like the whole thing with stacking odds in your favor is I figure it's so hard to kill them how it is. If there's anything I know that's going to up those odds, I'm going to do it. So that's kind of the whole percentage deal as far as I've learned over the years. If you can do it, do it, because, a lot of people will say it doesn't matter, just get a good wind. Well, you know what? Sometimes that deer's unpredictable comes from a place you didn't think he'd come, right?
Yeah.
It's like your entry. Oh, I could get in here. It's not a great wind, but I'm going to try it anyway. Well, maybe that's the day. I mean, half the bucks I've shot have come from the wrong direction, have come in the wrong way, and those little things that you do, like if I would have entered the way that buck came from, like I intended to, instead of going the long way around, I never would have shot that deer. And that deer is only one of, how many deer I've shot in my life. So it's like those little things that you don't think are a big deal could be the big deal on that day.
They could be the make or break you.
Right. Yep. So you just got to start stacking them if you can do it,
Well, and I think exactly what you're saying with all my, whitetail experience with a bow of one deer killed. No, but honestly, the deer that I shot this year actually came in on my doe estrus scent trail. I walked in on the heaviest trail and towards my towards my stand. And what was interesting is that the wind was blowing almost right in my face. He was almost directly downwind. I mean, he was just barely off the path of where I was sitting from. And I do try to like control my scent and do all those types of things. And so to me, like to have that happen, to have that work out and his nose to the ground or him like being distracted. And I think it was towards the end of the rut. And it was like, you know what? And even that day I was like, I knew the wind was marginal. It wasn't what I wanted. But I was like, I'm going to do everything as right as I can. I'm going to descent as best I can. I'm going to put the scent on my boot and walk on the heaviest trail I can find that led up to a scrape. And then I'll go to my stand and just hope for the best. And he came literally the opposite way that I thought he was going to be coming from. And not 2 minutes before he started walking out, there's a train that was going by for like 20 minutes. And so it was just like absolutely like as marginal as you can get is what I felt like. But who knows what little tiny thing made the difference in that sit out that morning. So I guess
probably that doe urine you had on your boot that he had his nose on.
And that's what I think it is as well, because he came straight up to my boots right where I dropped it on, because I was
they get stupid.
Yeah,
they do.
They do.
I'm telling you,
that's the only reason
walked in right behind you.
That's the only reason I got my deer was he was hot on a trail of a doe and just didn't care that I was there.
Yeah,
So-
you
So
don't.
bottom line, they all got to be pretty dumb for us to shoot them. That's what we're getting at.
Yeah. So
It's got to be November sometime.
that's probably about right.
Yeah.
So then the other thing I was thinking as you were talking there, I was like, you know what? Okay, I know for me, because there's, probably 99% of my hunts were unsuccessful to my 1%, if that's even, it could have been less than 1% that was successful. There were times where I was walking out, like you said, taking the long way around, depending on the wind, or even just switching it up just so you're not doing the same pattern. Mm-hmm. How do you stay? Because I felt there's times I was walking out and I'm like, is this even worth it? Or like going to a new spot that I'd never looked at before besides e-scouting and being like, oh, this is so far out there. Oh, it's like, I do like this little whiny thing in my head. And then I get out there and it, in some cases it turned out like where I got my buck. That's where I found it. I was like, oh, wow, this area is like awesome. And that was just from e-scouting and getting past the, oh my gosh, is this worth my time? Am I crazy? Like, is this worth it? Is this worth wasting a hunt to somewhere where I think, my mind is saying wasting a hunt, but I'm looking at different areas that I know a little bit better going, I might have a chance there, but trying to explore new areas. How do you stay positive? Do you have that cross your mind at all? Or is it like you've kind of gotten to a process where it's kind of tried and true in your mind where it's like, yeah, I just know that something's going to fail and I know something's going to be good? Or do you kind of encounter those thoughts still?
I would say 80 to 90% of my hunts, I feel like I'm going to fail. No joke. I mean, I do as best I can, but, for instance, I did 33 sits this year. I never sat the same tree twice, except for, I guess, one time. And most of those spots going in, I guess for me, when you're out there or you're getting out there or whatever else, hunting's supposed to be fun, Yeah. So like with you walking out and with you going to the spot, like, oh, I'm wasting a hunt, that crossed my mind almost every time because I've covered so much new ground trying to figure out, where deer are and where they're not. And I have busted so many bucks out of their bedding area, but I've also learned where they bed. So it is absolutely inescapable to question yourself. What am I doing? Like, is this really worth it? Because I know for a fact that these like the biggest buck I've even seen out here, is 100 yards off the road watching cars go by, and I know that for a fact. Jeez. And I'm taking a 2-mile hike into a spot I've never been to instead of hunting that buck. But that's because at a certain point in time, I'll hunt that buck, and there's reasons why I'll hunt that buck at a certain time, but I'm not going to hunt him unless the time is right. So what I'll do is I'll just go out and I'll go on those, is this a waste of time hunt? But, you've covered in your last podcast or whatever, it's not a waste of time if you're learning something. And you know what? It's not a waste of time if you're enjoying yourself. And there's a lot of times where you put yourself where some good deer are and you're not even enjoying yourself. So the whole putting a stand on your back and going for a walk, or not even putting a stand on your back and going for a walk, getting out there and enjoying it is one of those things that there's weight to it, whether you shoot a deer or not, But I guess the biggest reason I think I can go out and enjoy it now is because we were talking about it before, is I kind of built what I call a portfolio. I've had so many cameras out and I've put in so much time scouting that I have found areas where I know good bucks are, and there's enough areas now where I believe I can go out and I can screw up a couple times, taking a chance on a buck, because I've acquired enough areas elsewhere where I'm not hunting one specific buck. And if I screw up, I'm going to be furious and I'm going to, my season's over. So I guess as long as we're talking whitetails, my advice is you'll enjoy yourself more. And this is a no-brainer. If you find more bucks, if you can find more bucks,
Shocker.
You'll enjoy yourself more. Shocker. No, but the real thing of it is if you if it's going to take years, and it has taken years, but
So
when you can get to a point where you've seen different bucks on different trail cameras, and you've been able to say, okay, this is their general area, this is their general area, this is their general area, you can go out and you can make a few mistakes because that is not your last deer, or that is not maybe your target deer. So putting in more work actually ends up being more enjoyable in the long run. Not that I don't enjoy the work, but it becomes more enjoyable because there's not so much at stake almost.
yeah.
Ooh.
So
It's not pass or fail anymore.
and with kind of looking for these bucks, are you looking for them on multiple different locations? Like, do you
Onyx will have like a buck area.
Yeah.
They'll just stick a little dot on it.
Yep.
And
Well,
if
like
you can just find those dots.
like as far
I'm
as
messing with you.
like I see what you did there.
I'll drop some. Hey,
I got a
Dusty,
few.
I'll drop some for you next
All
time.
right, thank you. Just drop them. I'll go.
And that's a wrap.
I knew it.
What are your plans for next
I
year?
need
I'm gonna find the dots.
I need that filter. Wait,
Where's the buck filter?
how much does that filter cost?
Dude, I
arm and a
had
leg.
a genius idea. We could start dropping pins where big bucks are, and there can be a dollar sign on that pin. And if you want to buy that
Oh,
pin,
my goodness.
you can get a
Ooh.
picture of that deer. You can get the time of day, the wind conditions,
Seth,
and
Seth,
people can
stop.
buy.
You're
Go.
giving, you're
Someone
gonna,
else-
you're
someone
giving our
else-
business ideas away.
There's millions of listeners that are going to be totally
Are you
trademarking that.
kidding? We just
You
blew
sold it.
our own minds.
That's awesome. That's actually
Dude.
honestly, that's actually really. I'm glad you brought that up because Dusty and I think
I'm not anymore.
well, not the Onyx selling part, but I am really glad you brought up about like essentially diversifying your portfolio, so to speak, because
You have to.
because I have one buck on camera that I think is a shooter for next year.
Well, he's a monster.
Dustin has
I got-
one buck on camera
do.
that's a shooter for next year. That's all we
Okay.
have so far. So what would you suggest to a couple of newbies who, you know, I mean, you encounter a lot of the same obstacles we have. You got a family, you have limited time.
Oh, your family's an obstacle. Okay.
Well, you know what I mean, like because it's something we have to
I get it,
prioritize,
yeah.
and hunting doesn't always go to the top, surprisingly. And so, what would you suggest? How would you manage what time you do have to try to figure out more locations and more bucks to have in your quote unquote portfolio?
I would say the main thing is the amount of cameras you have. And so we all have limited funds. So if you can, you get as many cameras as you can. Don't buy new boots. Don't buy this or that. Buy cameras. And then we've covered this in the past, just on the phone. Running cameras in the off season is not like running them during the season. And when I find like a big buck or a couple big bucks, and I find where they're at, and I find them consistently a couple times, I'll pull cameras. I'll go find other bucks. If each deer has somewhat of a core area, right? And you're leaving a camera there, and this is what we talked about. You're leaving a camera there for a month. What are you going to see? You're going to see the core deer that live there for a month, right?
Yeah.
So if you are in a buck's core area, my assumption is if he's using that trail, he's going to use it within a week. If he doesn't use that trail within a week, assume you're not in a buck's core area. Move your camera.
Is that
I would even go.
Would that be off season? Are you talking like kind of our off season, or are you talking like in season? That's what you're saying.
Well,
Just to
here's the
clarify.
deal. We have bucks with shed antlers right now. So I'm talking as soon as you shoot your deer, whatever time, August, September, October, November, January, they don't lose their horns till here. They don't lose them till stinking like March. So here's the deal. Once you shoot your deer or whatever, take those cameras while they still have their horns and start moving them. Even if it's 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, however many days, there's no point in looking at the same deer over and over. And there's no point in leaving it in a spot where you find out there's a buck there. Great. Now he came by there 3 times. Next year, he may or may not come by there 3 times, whatever. But you know he's in that area. So if you don't have a lot of cameras, or even if you do, I would set them up as many places as I could on a heavy trail or whatever. And then I would rotate them as much as time allows. Because all it takes is one picture of one good buck. And I've learned that from these last like 5 years. All it takes is one good picture of a buck. And if you hunt that area, you're probably going to see that buck again. That's just, that's one thing I've learned. They are absolutely creatures of habit. I've got the same deer, like the same 4 bucks in these same areas for 4 years.
Wow.
Whether they show up at the beginning of the season, middle of the season, end of season, I see the same deer.
Yeah.
That's the thing about it. So if you only got 3 trail cameras and you're going to go, okay, I'm going to stick this one here for a month. I'm going to stick this one here for a month. I'm going to stick that one there for a month. You're doing yourself a disservice because you don't want to look at the same spot for a month. And you know what? Say you leave it up for 3 days and he comes by on the 4th day. Big deal. You're going to another spot. You're going to cover 18 different spots as opposed to one spot. You're not guaranteed that deer anyway, right?
Yeah. Right.
So keep that crap moving and try and build some type of quote unquote portfolio where if someone comes in and hunts that spot and that's where you found your big buck, well, that's no good anymore. So now you got to move. So the more spots you can find with bucks that you would kill, I mean, it's a no-brainer, obviously, but people aren't looking for, like, people think I'm crazy. I have, say, like 15 different spots, and I can only hunt, I could only hunt one of those spots. Maybe I'll tag out. But honestly, I've seen, say, 10 different spots go down to 2 different spots in a matter of a couple months.
Wow.
And had I not gone ahead and made some type of portfolio of different bucks in different areas and good areas, I wouldn't be shooting them. And that's one of the things that you got to put the odds in your favor on, is everyone else will be content maybe with having 2 or 3 different spots. But I'm not talking you're going to go and hunt every single one, but you need a backup plan to your backup plan. Everything that I hunt other than one spot is public land. I had people at work describing my tree stands and they didn't know they were mine. So I'm going, I literally set that sucker up, trim that tree. Took me 2 days to get it right how I wanted it. A month in, someone says that's my stand. I pulled it. I'm not going to waste my time there, you know?
Wow.
So
yeah.
So one of the things with public land hunting is you need to have more cards in your deck than what everybody else has, because the reason a lot of people aren't shooting deer is either they're hunting the same stand or they're hunting the same area and they're going, well, that guy just moved in here. I'm going to move 30 yards further this way or 100 yards further this way. If you're trying to shoot a big mature deer and that deer knows that other guy's there, you're wasting your time. Pull your stuff and go, you know? So you got to set yourself up where you've got a backup plan to your backup plan to your backup plan. You know, I don't know. That's just my opinion on it.
That's actually super helpful, because where I've found the buck that's a shooter, I've actually had a friend send me some pictures of some other bucks that are in the surrounding area, and you know that the area that where that's at is pretty heavily hunted. That now that I found out, you know, I'm thinking like, oh, it's hard to get to. It's a swampy area. No one wants to go there. And I happened to post a picture, but he's like, hey, I know where that is. And so him and I started talking back and forth, and it's actually been, our friendship has grown from it, that's for sure. But also it's the only area that I have a buck that I was like, oh, that would be cool to shoot next year. I think one thing you're talking about that I learned really this last season, was early on, we would get married to a spot, like you were talking about, like we were saying, you know, Old Faithful, whatever it was, and even growing up,
or Old Unfaithful.
yeah, we'd call it Old Faithful regardless of what happened. But we would have these spots that we were like, oh, that's set up off a heavy trail. We go there every year. I think a big important thing to mention that you just touched on, Seth, too, was we're hunting public land, and so you don't know. By happenstance that I found out that someone hunts this area that I'm looking at. But in some of the public land, I've gone back, I've spent a half a day scouting and then realized, oh, there's guys all over the place in here because their stands are up all year. And it's like, okay, I guess I got to move. But I wouldn't know that without scouting. So I went this last year. I was like, oh, I'm counting this as like a scouting year. But really for me, it sounds like I'm going to have to keep it that way. I mean, do you keep like each year, even during the season? Or is your portfolio built up enough on target bucks that you don't really count it as a scouting year? I think for me, I'm going to have to continue to make it a, quote unquote scouting year where I'm willing to be like, hey, here's where my target buck is, but I am going to spend some of my few precious hunts on areas I've never been to just to see what's going on in that area. Would that be?
Yeah. So
go ahead.
So for me, every year I intend for it to be a scouting year. Because I intend to kill the bucks I scouted.
Gosh.
But
burn.
no, but honestly, I assume I'm always going to be scouting. I enjoy scouting. I don't enjoy not feeling confident going into a spot. I do get that absolutely. This is probably a waste of a hunt feeling. Like I said, the majority of the time I go in and I'm like semi-optimistic, and at the same time you're going, time could be better spent elsewhere. Yeah. I think for me, here's how my season looked this year. Okay. Found some really good bucks early on in the season. Had them the year before. They were there again. Found a couple more really nice bucks in a different area. Until it is the right time, which is either those bucks are walking by my trail camera during daylight on a shootable day, or rut's coming. If I have big bucks walking by my trail camera at night, I don't bother going in there. If they're going in there, if they're going by it during the day, maybe I'll give it a hunt, but I'm only going to give it a hunt maybe once in 3 weeks, maybe. And then maybe I'll go over to another spot that's the same scenario and hunt that once in 3 weeks. My biggest thing, I am a firm believer in rut hunting. It is a lot easier to pattern them when it's early season and you have a food source and then you have woods. That's something different that I didn't have in Wisconsin. They do a lot of browsing there. So it wasn't like bedding to food source, which really narrows stuff down. Emily shot a really nice buck last year. I did some surveillance from the side of the field, saw where some deer are going in and out. We put up some trail cameras, figuring out there's some real nice bucks there. They're doing about the same thing. So we set up accordingly, and she shot an awesome buck. But there's times like this year, there were probably 3 bucks I really wanted to kill, but I didn't hunt them but probably 2 times before November. And the reason is getting into that spot was so hard to do without boogering deer. During rut, you have so much deer activity and so many multiple bucks running around that even if you booger deer in the morning, there's a likely chance that a nice buck or whatever is going to be running that valley again at some point in that day. So what I would do is I'd go on a lot of scouting trips, and a good thing to do is I would set up cameras. Every place I go, I'd bring at least one camera in my backpack. And I'd go and I'd set it up, and I'd intend to, next time I don't have someplace else to hunt, I'm going to come back, I'm going to pull that camera, and I'm going to hunt that spot. And that's how I do my cameras, is I bring them and I set them, I bring them and I set them. So I had 33 hunts, and I say one valley I got 4 cameras, and then the rest of my cameras are wherever I go and hunt, and then I'll check them as I hunt them. But I won't go into a spot and check a camera unless I'm hunting it, because I think that's maybe not smart to do. You might booger deer. I mean, you might as well bring your bow and sit it. It's kind of what I was doing. So as far as, I forget the question. Let's go back to that.
That's okay. We can actually even keep moving because I think that's super good information, even just that side of it. And I think that's what actually, when I saw my 8-point buck the first time, I had missed it, but I had went in with the intent of kind of scouting. And like you said, well, if I'm in there, I may as well hunt it. And I remember getting in about 10, 15 yards into the bushes, and then I'm finding all these buck beds, and I'm like, okay, I'm just going to set up like 40 yards off of these. There's a really nice tree for it. So I set up, and I sat for maybe an hour, hour and a half, and I ended up total seeing like 4 bucks and one that I for sure shoot. And I remember I was like, oh, I saw the buck that I'm willing to shoot, even though I missed it ultimately. Mm-hmm. I was like, well, I'm not even going to leave the camera because I know there's something in here I want to shoot.
Yes.
And so I don't know if that kind of lines up with your line of thought as well, where you're like, okay, I know it's in here. It's something I'm interested in. It sounds like maybe it might have been a good idea to leave a camera there just to get some information, or do you think that was played out right?
I think we had that phone conversation. If you know that buck's in there and you've only got a couple, 2-3 cameras, and you know that buck's in there already.
Yep.
Yeah. No, but if you already know that buck's in there, I would be looking for, honestly, I'd be looking for other bucks or other places to put my camera, because a camera for me is just a tool to figure out if they're in that area at some general time. I guess for me, I haven't really done a bunch of patterning deer. Mm-hmm. One thing that I do look for, and we should talk about baiting at some point, but what I do look for is that, okay, are they there during daylight? I don't care if a buck is there every single day in the dark like clockwork. I'm not going in unless I have a buck during daylight on a camera. Absolutely not. I'll put it this way. We'll talk a little about baiting. There's a proper way to bait. There's 4 different, we were talking earlier, but there's 4 different ways you can like hunt a deer, Yep. You can put out a bait pile.
Bait pile. 1.
You can set preset stands, right?
Yep.
You can do a run and gun, or whatever you want to call it, a scouting and a hang and hunt.
Yep.
Or you can do a spot and stock. So the deal with baiting, I bait deer because I'm a firm believer in filling your tag no matter what time of year it is. And, here's the deal. So if you're going to bait, this is my suggestion. This is purely my suggestion. Unless you have a shooter buck on your trail camera at your bait pile, please do not believe that the day that you go out there to sit that stand, randomly he's going to walk in broad daylight and give you a shot. Last year, or the year before, my wife and I, she had shot a deer over bait like the year before. So what we did is we baited a spot for 6 months. We had a giant buck coming into the bait every other day. Giant buck. Always during the dark. And then 50 does, whatever. We didn't hunt that stand a single time all year. And we baited it probably once every 2 weeks. We had tons of deer on it. We had one giant, and then, some smaller bucks. But unless that buck was there during the daylight, we didn't sit it. Not one single time. And we baited that thing for 6 months. Jeez. That's, in my mind, how you use a bait pile. And that is why I'm a firm believer in bait piles. Because here's the deal. If I strike out when I'm doing my hanging hunts and I don't end up shooting a deer, if I strike out when I'm using my set stands in specific spots, and if I strike out spot and stock, my last resort is going to be my bait pile. And I fully intend on not hunting that bait pile more than 1 or 2 times. I don't care how long I've had the bait out there. I don't care whatever. Sometimes the only way to kill a giant buck is over a corn pile because you've struck out every other way. And I'm not too proud to kill a buck while he's eating whatever he's eating. Because that's the truth of it, though, is if that's the only way you can kill that deer, and you get to eat it, well then, if you can get that deer during daylight and you can't kill it any other way, do it, you know? But if I do have a bait pile, I absolutely have a trail camera on it because I'm not going to waste my time, you know, having 50 deer at that bait pile cleaning me out every day and not knowing if it's during daylight or not.
So, in my situation, being in Minnesota, we can't bait. Would you suggest then looking at a known
plant some apple trees?
Yeah, a food plot.
Quick return.
Yeah, I'm just gonna plant some apple trees on the public land. But like with we got some nice WMA spots in Minnesota that I've hit with my buddy Steve, where I mean the deer are known to come in. I mean, you got corn, you've got radishes and turnips. Would you substitute that as kind of like your bait pile area if all else fails? Go to a spot like that and being able to put out a trail cam possibly, and where deer are going to be coming in.
Yeah. Okay. So the deal with bait piles is, growing up, I learned that deer are super sneaky and cautious and quiet, and they tiptoe in and they wait until exactly dark, and then right after dark they're going to come in. Deer don't do that if you're hunting a field or a turnip field unless you're pressuring it. So the whole thing with bait piles is the deer will get wise to you really quickly. I mean, how many sits? You're going to sit 20 yards from a pile of bait, and then when they're ready to come in at dusk, you're going to go, oh, time to go. So they're going to catch you, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they have to. There's way more deer catching you than you know. There's way more deer catching you. I'll give you a for instance on a chickpea field. I sat a chickpea field earlier this year. It loaded up with deer. I had a couple nice bucks come in behind me, and one of them caught my wind or something and spooked off, and I knew that buck saw me or knew I was there, right?
Yep.
And there's these rest of these deer. They're out in the field, and so as far as I know, there's maybe 2 or 3 deer that saw me up in that tree or that knew I was there. I had a good wind. I was blowing back off the field, not out into the field. There's probably 30 deer, right?
Yep.
So I seen where these deer came out to the field. So I decided I'm going to move my stand closer down to where they came out, and I invited my brother-in-law to come along next time and sit the field with me, because there's a big field and there's probably 30 deer in it. So I went and I sat my stand at the other end of the field from where I was before, and he sat more up toward the corner, not probably 80 yards, 100 yards from where my original tree was.
Okay.
He told me that there was at least half a dozen deer or more that circled that tree, smelt that tree, looked up in that tree over and over again the whole time they were feeding. And so part of I sat 33 times this year, but I only sat the same tree twice, is that. You have no idea how many deer have seen you or smelt you and now would have you pegged if you were in that tree.
That's that.
Yeah.
And I remember this brings to mind something that I hadn't considered before when I was rifle hunting in an area that I just kind of went to every single morning, every single evening, deer drives in the afternoon. I would go out there and I'd get out there, 2-3 hours before sunlight, because I was like, oh, got to put in the time. But I remember almost every morning after the first morning, I would get a snort wheeze or just start stomping at me behind me where I couldn't see almost every morning after that. And I was so frustrated, even with the wind in my favor. I was like, what's happening? But it sounds like I probably just educated them is what happened. And then, my great bait pile off to my left isn't that great because, I might have just educated them, because I was doing the exact same entry, the exact same time pretty much. And it probably just gave away my position, and I never changed it. I never thought twice about it.
Right. And go ahead.
But I did want to, if you're okay with it, because we did talk a little bit about baiting, obviously, and you kind of talked about that as being your last resort. And I know I really wanted, for me, I want to talk about something that I think people are more just learning or getting on board with, which is kind of countercultural to maybe the generation or two, or even maybe more than that before us, is what's your primary way to hunt? I mean, are you looking at are we just going to go sit on the edge of a field? Are we looking for beds? Are we looking for travel corridors? Specifically talking about bucks, what's the main thing you're looking for to determine where you're going to hunt, where you're going to put in a bunch of your time?
Quick thing. I want to answer Dusty's question because I don't think I answered it, because he asked if that field he was sitting would be considered a bait pile, and I don't think I finished that.
Okay.
So just to finish that real quick, if you do sit at Dusty,
Okay.
I would recommend moving your stand. Like, move your stand, no matter if you're sitting in the same field, just like in that field that I was talking about.
Yep.
Move your stand.
Okay.
So as opposed to like a bait pile, right? You're basically going to be within 30 yards of it, right?
Yep.
So these deer are going to tiptoe in, and they're going to look around, and they're going to wait till after dark, right? So in order to not get the bait pile reaction from a deer, or to at least keep them guessing, even if they did smell you or something, I would absolutely 100% keep moving on that field. Mm-hmm. Don't sit that same spot on the same edge that you originally sat, because you're going to, you don't know what deer you have spooked, or you don't know what deer have seen you, But so I just wanted to answer that, because next year coming up, you're going to be on the edge of a field and you're going to wonder.
I'm glad
not
so
that,
true. So
not
true.
that I know 100% that that's the right answer, but I do know it's a better idea than sitting in the same tree, because you don't know what deer have seen you. And bucks, they don't react the same as like a doe all the time. Those does are
or even honestly, even like you and I talked about the last podcast, Dusty. Even those really, spikes, those 4-pointers.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, we practically walk right up to them.
Yep.
And it's like you almost like I know I passed on them. I talked about it. Part of it is like it's not enough to want to end my season as far as like the excitement level and like really feeling like fulfilled. But a big part of it too is like, I almost didn't feel like this was fair chase, because they're almost so dumb at times.
Stupid, yeah.
You're like, what's going on? And so also, like, it seems like really small bucks. Would you agree that like really small bucks at times, those real young ones, where it's like they just don't have a clue yet?
Mm-hmm.
Well, exactly. That was actually one thing I wrote down to specifically say today was,
nice.
Okay, every giant buck out there, and this is why it's so important to stack the odds in your favor and to do it right when you go out. If you're going to do it correctly. Every single big buck out there was a fawn. Every single big buck out there was a yearling. It was a 2-year-old and it was a 3-year-old. Okay? So now you're hunting grandpa's stand, or now you're hunting the same spot, or now you're walking in all willy-nilly, right? And you're educating this little fawn. And now you're educating a 1-year-old. So by the time he gets old enough, he knows exactly what you're doing, right? So the thing with big bucks is they have all those years experience, and we go into all these spots that are, doe only, or, small buck only spots, or whatever. But you are educating a giant buck no matter when you go into a spot that has deer.
That's a good way to think about it. I hadn't thought about it in that light before.
but it's true, because if you go like with my trail cameras and the way I get in and out of these spots, like only hunting them or only checking my trail camera when I'm hunting, I'm assuming, I don't know how many years I'll be hunting, hopefully for a really long time, but I have up and comer bucks on public land, right?
Yeah.
So
right, yeah.
I'm already at a big disadvantage because anybody has access to these deer.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But when I'm going in and I'm checking these trail cameras, I'm seeing spike bucks. I'm seeing 4-pointers, 6-pointers, 8-pointers, 10-pointers, whatever is on there. I don't want to give any of them an education because it takes 2 years for a fork to get to be maybe 2, 3, 4 years to get to be something you want to shoot, right?
Yep.
So you kind of have to respect the fact that every deer has potential of being your future deer. So if you can give them that respect, one day you're probably going to end up shooting them just because you've been doing it right all these years. That just goes back to the guy who's got a 200-inch deer on his wall, and that's the only deer he's got because he doesn't take it seriously every time he goes out. You know, I've taken it seriously to a point where I almost dislike hunting, which I don't do anymore.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm serious.
Yeah.
But that's the thing about it is you're educating a big buck every time you go out, whether you think you are or not. Just when you go out, do it right, you know?
I think that's kind of a big game changer for me, just thinking about like some of the areas that I've seen some of these younger, smaller bucks on last year, and I've never thought about more that long-term aspect in mind. I've always just kind of thought like, next year. Like I've always thought next year, not 2 years, 3 years, 4 years down the road. Like these are viable, bucks. This is a viable area.
And you might be the only person. Yeah, you might be the only person who know those deer are there.
And
so
I'm
you find an
screwing it
area. You find an area where you've got a little block of say 4 small bucks, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, you're back in the middle of nowhere, or you're in a spot that no one would think to go, right?
Yeah.
And they don't go there because maybe they picked up those bucks, right?
Yeah.
But you keep a journal or keep something. I keep all my photos and everything on drives and thumb drives and whatever else on my laptop.
Yeah.
But I keep a little log of kind of what's where, because I'm already 4 years in to where I've been hunting already. So now, quite literally, those yearling bucks are shooters.
Yeah.
And it only took 4 years.
Dude,
Dude, I'm telling you, I've been here 4 years. Now the ones that were 2, and now the ones that were, once you have 4 years into a spot and you've put in time and you've put in hours and you have the photos and you have the different things, you literally now have 10 different spots with 10 different shooters because only a 4-year period.
That is such a game changer for me, honestly, because I seriously have gotten discouraged. Like even I mentioned last episode was, there's only like I left my camera over the gut pile because I was just interested to see the wildlife around that area from that buck I got. And I left it there and there was like a 6-pointer, a 4-pointer. And I'm like, discouraged because I'm not thinking big picture.
Yeah.
And then there's areas I've hunted and I know that area is probably not touched. I mean, honestly, how loud those deer are and like almost careless, almost not quite, but almost careless. I was like, I've never heard deer this loud before. But then
probably hunted bait piles,
right? and there's a few other areas, and I posted videos online where I'm looking at these 4-pointers, or just spike bucks, and I'm just like, man, nothing around here we're shooting. It really is, and then I would probably go sit that spot, the exact same spot next year. Whereas now I'm like, I can't do it that way because I'm ruining, based on what you're saying, I'm ruining perhaps an opportunity at a mature buck in a few more years. And so for me, that's actually really encouraging to what I thought was actually discouraging when I'm looking at these tiny bucks going, I haven't found a big shooter yet. But the reality is I want to hunt, like you said, I don't know how long I have left to hunt, but I'd love to be hunting many more years.
Yeah.
And if I can open my mind up to the idea that I'm going to be hunting these animals for many years, and when I see a yearling, take it as seriously as seeing a mature buck.
Yeah.
So that's actually, I mean, honestly, I'm like a little bit mind blown. I'm like,
except for Bob. I'm pretty sure Bob that we ran into was
Bob's
he was
dead.
Special. Yeah.
Yeah, he's not going to be around very long. He was like, how close was he to you?
Oh, he got like 5 yards.
Oh my god,
5 yards. I probably could have pulled my knife and ran him through.
Yeah,
should have taken off a backstrap.
Just one side.
Just one.
Let him keep growing though.
Oh man.
Dude.
Yeah, that is dude. That's a game changer.
That's pretty awesome. So I think we did answer Dusty's question.
Yes. And more.
So if I can, I'll restate the question if that's all right with you, Seth.
Please do.
Yeah.
We're so far gone.
So I know we've talked about it a little bit, but I'd love for everyone else, anybody who's listening, to kind of get on the same understanding or page as what you've shared with me. I think past generations have always hunted or primarily hunted food sources. And like you mentioned, Seth, where it's like they get educated on that really quickly, or they'll wait just till after dark and then they'll come out. And I would say, from my understanding, from what I've watched, what I've observed, that little experience and then just talking with other people, is that these mature bucks are going to play it even safer than, some does or some yearlings. Mm-hmm. So what's your idea on hunting those? Is there a tactic that might be countercultural, generally speaking, as far as what you're going to hunt in order to get them? Is it, beds? Is it traveling corridors? What is it that helps you get in their zone, so to speak, and get that, be successful, I guess, hunting those more mature animals?
I think we go back to basically surveillance, or figuring out those spots maybe from a distance. So let's do it this way. You've got a field. You've got timber surrounding that field. The first thing you have to figure out is if there is a deer worth shooting coming out into that field at a time you can shoot it. Okay. So before we get technical on hunting beds or where to put your cameras or anything else like that, you need to figure out if there's a deer worth shooting on that food source. So I guess what I do a lot is I'll check as many food sources as I can. I mean, thinking it's not like any of us have just a boatload of time. Getting out and scouting is one of the hardest things to do, and that's why I'm sure all three of us end up scouting and hunting the same day.
That's
right?
Fair. Yep.
So there's there's a dynamic to it where you need to be scouting an area to see if there's a deer worth shooting coming out in daylight. But at the same time, you need to do it from a hunting that deer aspect. So I guess put it like this. Let me see here. You don't want to educate a deer prior to even hunting it, I guess. As much as you're learning, they're learning too. Mm-hmm. So you have to take the wind seriously. You need to take your entry seriously. And, those are a couple things. Just starting out, make sure you got the right wind if you're going to be checking food sources. And then make sure your entry, or however you're looking, whether it's camo or up in a tree or off the side of the field, make sure that is coming from a hunter's aspect too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds very simplistic because it is, but at the same time, if you're going out and you're doing reconnaissance on a food source or whatever, it has to be, like I said in the beginning, they're 100% of the time trying to stay alive. Mm-hmm. So you have to kind of take it that seriously.
And some of
when
those,
you're out there even scouting.
Yeah, and I think some of those scouting ones you can almost write off as like a little more relaxed approach, as far as like, oh, am I going to descent all the way? Am I going to worry about this, the wind direction? Oh, I'm so far off, I should be good. But in reality is the reason you're scouting is because you don't know the answers to some questions already, which could surprise you, and all of a sudden they're really close to you, right?
Right.
So some of those scouting trips can be actually, opportunities to kill.
Right. And that's the thing with deer hunting. There's always a chance, whether it's a scouting mission or a hunting mission, that you could kill a deer because they're a wild animal. So, you got to go into it, with an attitude of respect of what you're doing, But so what I would do is if I want to hunt a food source and I want to hunt, and there's big timber around or whatever, the first thing is figure out if a deer's coming out into that field worth shooting. And if it takes a couple times to do it and you don't see one, that's going to be up to you whether you want to go into where they are, into that timber, and start setting up trail cameras or not. If it were me, I would want to see a deer that I want to shoot, because there's probably some other places where there are deer I want to shoot while I'm wasting my time checking that food source over and over and over, hoping for a deer, you know?
Yeah.
So I would say, going back to their creatures of habit, if there is a deer we're shooting in there, hopefully or probably you will see them out on that food source. Hopefully, if it's preseason, there shouldn't be too much pressure. Hopefully you'll see them, right?
Yep.
And if not, just like with your trail cameras moving a lot, maybe the next day a giant buck will come out and you won't be there, right?
Yeah.
But you do still have to find a deer, right?
Yeah.
So it's a toss up of how many times you want to go to that spot. Maybe that's the only spot you got, so you're going to go 7 times and try and hopefully catch one of 7 times. You know, it's really hard to say how much you wait for a specific deer on quote unquote reconnaissance, and how much you want to be into their environment, because by the time you maybe see them, maybe they already know that you've been watching them.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
But let's play this scenario where you have been watching a spot, you're out your second time, there he is in all his glory, just everything you ever wanted in a buck, and now you have to try and figure out how to kill him, right?
Yep.
So what my mindset would go is same as yours. Where did he come from? And so at this point, do you need a trail camera where he came from or not? What do you think?
Well,
it's an actual question.
Yeah. I guess in my mind, kind of going back to my experience from this year, I went, nope, I don't need a trail camera where he came from. I know he's in this area on what I expect to be a travel corridor, and he came from a different direction, but he was heading on the same trail. So for me, I'm going to say no.
Okay, perfect. We've gotten somewhere tonight. Okay, so yeah, this is just me. This is my thought process when I'm hunting deer. I'm trying to use every resource I have as best I can, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not hunting over a bait pile, so I don't need to know that deer was, in this many times at night, blah, blah, blah. He's out there in front of me during the daylight, right? He was there on the second time that I was there. So what I'm going to do, instead of going like a lot of people do, and I'm not poo-pooing a lot of people, I'm just saying this is
oh,
one
yes,
of the things,
you are, sir.
No, this is one of the things that happens is you see that deer out there, you're like, heck yeah, I'm going to get a bunch of pictures of him. I'm going to pattern him. I'm going to only check this trail camera once every 2 weeks, and I'm going to walk across this field, and I'm going to set it up. I'm going to see him or not, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I would dare to say, maybe instead of going and putting a camera that he's going to walk out and smell on his way out to feed, why not just go there, stick up a stand where you think he's going to come out of, hunt to kill him, and see what happens. Take your camera that you were going to stick there, go put it someplace else maybe. Mm-hmm. And basically, you're going to base what you're going to do off of your sit, right?
Yeah.
He either winded you, or he came out this way, or he came out that way, or whatever. But what you're doing is you're creating your time that you've spent out there and the scent that you've put out there and the visual of you walking around out there from a deer that's 20 yards back in the woods. You never saw them, and now they're gone. You're taking that big window that most people create of, I'm putting out my trail camera, I'm setting up my stand, I'm going to come hunt my stand early tomorrow morning, I'm, this, that, and the other. And you're taking all those things that deer pick up on, and you're eliminating them all. And you already know the buck was out there during the light. So your next step is to get where you think he's going to come out, so you can shoot him when he comes out. Now, once you're up in that tree and he's going to come out to this field to feed, or he doesn't, that's when you're going to start, okay, now what do I do? But as far as getting into an area and like setting up on an area, I don't really believe in the whole, at least too often. Basically, I guess what I'm getting at is off of your first sit, that's where you're going to determine your next move.
I like that.
So that's what you got to do. But I would say don't waste your time poking at the edges. Don't waste your time like going 50 yards back in, setting a trail camera, this, that, or the other.
Mm-hmm.
If you can find one on a food source, hunt it right away, because he may not be needing that food source, or he may not be at that food source at another time.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason that you have like quote unquote portfolio, or you have multiple places or multiple bucks if you can, is because you can afford, and that's what I've done this year, last year, you can afford to go in and make that bold move instead of like, okay, I'm going to wait till he's rutting. Well, when he's rutting, he might be a mile down the road. If you have a deer on a food source early season, or you have a deer on a food source that's come out at all, you should hunt him right away, and you should not go poking around prior to hunting him, because he'll probably figure you out a lot quicker than you'll figure him out.
Yeah, because he's already viewing that as you hunting him. That's the same amount of pressure as you sitting in the stand. I mean, you know, outside of some movement it might catch, whatever.
What's the first thing you see on a trail camera? A deer's nose.
Yeah.
You know?
Right?
Right.
Dude, well, I think, okay, so this has been absolutely awesome, and it's been super cool having you as the first guest on our podcast, and I think there's going to be many more to come, especially as we get close. So. Yeah, and I think especially as we get closer to whitetail season.
I think we need to revisit.
Dude, I would love to dig in a little bit more to the 4 things you brought up, which is the bait piles, the preset stands, the hang and hunts, and the spot and stock. And I know you kind of worked through some examples, but I think it's going to be really cool as we get closer to the season and people get more fired up and more engaged with things and going, okay, now I'm really starting to get into this. And I think you've done a pretty good job of like, hey, we're in, you know, kind of acknowledging the season we're in now.
Kind of hit a high level.
Yep, high level
of all of this.
And then like it gives us an idea on how to scout and how to use what cameras you do have, limited time, and all those things that I think most people are probably running into. So I think that today we'll probably wrap it up at that, and I think it's a lot for me to process.
Yeah, I know. I got a lot of things to process. My brain hurts.
I know. I need to go move my trail cameras immediately. But no, dude, I really appreciate you coming on, and you'll be definitely a regular with us on the podcast, because this has just been a blast and really eye opening in a lot of ways. There's even things that I had thought in previous private conversations with you, Seth, that some of these things you've said have actually been like, oh, I thought he thought this, you know, like, I mean, just a quick example is like, oh, you know, go find their beds and then hunt off of that. Well, there's more to it than that. So I'm excited to further the conversation and kind of open that up and allow other people to listen in and hear your thoughts on that. And so I guess thanks for joining us, and it's been really awesome.
Yeah,
so,
and if people want to connect with you, where can they find you?
In the woods. I don't want anyone to connect with me. They can connect with you.
Okay, fair enough. And where can they find us, Dusty?
They can find us on Instagram and Facebook at Venator Chronicles Podcast. We can also check us out on iTunes and Podbeans and YouTube. So, which hopefully in the future, probably further future, the near future, we'll have some video of our ugly mugs. Dude,
yes, that we're gonna try to get some videos of us out there. I'm gonna even try to do some of me like setting up the stand for turkey hunting. It's gonna be just a mess. So hopefully you guys want to join us for that.
It'll be a mess.
Yeah, it will be, but it's gonna be a lot of fun. Seth, I really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you.
Anytime.
All right, awesome.
And hopefully next time we won't take 2 hours to set up.
Yeah,
and figure out how to Skype.
Yep.
All right.
All right. Well,
do it again.
Cool. Seth, thanks for joining us. All the listeners, thanks for joining us. We'll hear from you guys, and we'll see you guys around. And thanks for listening in.
Take care.
All right. Peace out.
Peace.
Goodbye.